Folks, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand things over to Greg Sansoni, Senior Vice President of SportsNet, to get us started.
Thanks, Jason, and welcome everybody to the SportsNet Studios. We are so excited to host this event today. You would have heard last week that the UFC and SportsNet signed a multi-year deal to have the English language rights available beginning on January 1st exclusively to SportsNet. And what really stood out to me last week over the course of the announcement was hearing from Dana White talk about the fact that, back in the GSP days, SportsNet played a huge role in the growth of UFC in this country. And now we're really excited to have the UFC come back home in Canada so we can tell the great stories of these amazing athletes and to be able to talk about the fighters that will become the next generation of this sport. So I can't think of a better way to start our partnership than to have a pay-per-view in our own backyard, which is exactly why we're here today. UFC 297 in Toronto, January 20th. So for more on that and the reason why we're here today, I'm going to pass it right over to Dave Shaw. Dave?
Thanks, Greg. And good morning and welcome to the UFC 297 press conference here at SportsNet Studios. First off, thanks to Greg Sansoni, Collett Watson, and the rest of the SportsNet team with whom we are thrilled to be kicking off our broadcast relationships in Canada on January 1st. UFC 297 is Canada's 33rd event, 7th trip to Toronto with a championship fight. UFC 297 Strickland versus Duplessis goes on sale this week, Wednesday via UFC Fight Club, Thursday via the UFC newsletter, and Friday on Ticketmaster, ticketmaster.ca at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're thrilled to be coming back to Toronto after 5 years. On behalf of Dana White and the entire UFC family, we're also thrilled to be kicking off a relationship, reinvigorated relationship with SportsNet starting Jan 1st. As Greg mentioned, SportsNet and TVA Sport were instrumental in the growth of the UFC during formative years, the GSP days, as we call them, and we can't be more thrilled. We couldn't be more thrilled for kicking things off. SportsNet has made a commitment to not only profiling our brand in the sport of mixed martial arts, but paying particular emphasis to Canadian athletes across the company to tell their stories and their commitment to mixed martial arts. I'd now like to introduce you to a few of those athletes. We have 4 athletes here today of the 8 Canadian athletes competing on UFC 297. From my right, Serhiy Sidey, Contender Series new signee to Dana White's Contender Series. We've got Mike Malott, we've got Marc-Andre Barriault, and Jourdain. So I'd like to kick things off by opening up the floor to questions to myself and any athletes here.
Hey, Dave, back here. I guess to stick with what you were talking a little bit about there, could you just give some insight on how long this deal to return to SportsNet has been in the works, and I guess what fans can expect in terms of differing coverage from what we've seen in recent years?
So, we always knew that obviously the termination of, or the expiration of our former contract, our current contract, would be December 31st. We wanted to line up the possibility of either a renewal or a new broadcast relationship across the country with a pay-per-view in Toronto, and that's why the timing has worked out so well. As I mentioned before, I think the commitment to, our athletes across the country, we know whether it's in Vancouver, Victoria, through Manitoba, through Atlantic Canada and the Maritimes, we've got fans all across the country, and those fans gravitate to their local athletes. They gravitate to Canadian stars that have histories in their communities, that have made a commitment to the sport in those provinces. And so for us, what SportsNet can bring is like a renewed cycle of growth for our brand and for our athletes, and that's what we're thrilled about today.
Pre-pandemic, we were getting 3 events a year in Canada, and you'd mentioned that you kind of want to return to that eventually. Does this kind of lock that into the schedule going forward? Could there be more or less? How does this impact kind of the UFC's plans for live events here?
We're committed to coming back to Canada, 2, 3, 4 events. We're not sure how many we can hold next year. Our schedule's still in the works. What I can tell you is, Canada ranks sort of 3rd in terms of total number of events by country. US 1st, Brazil 2nd, and Canada 3rd. As I mentioned, this will be our 33rd event in the country. So our commitment to Canada is steadfast, and we will not be, wavering at all.
And then just for all the fighters up there. We can start with Charles and kind of go down. You've been asked, countless times in recent years what it would mean to fight in Toronto, back in Canada. Now that this is here, it's real, a couple months away. Just how do you guys all feel to be on this card?
Yeah, it's my 13th UFC fight. It's the first time I get to fight in Canada, so it's cool. I got a lot of people coming down from Quebec, and actually I'm surprised that most of my popularity comes from West Side, like Vancouver and Toronto. So I think the fans are thrilled. I think we have 4 great fighters over here. I think we have, 8 on the card? 8 Canadian fighters, so it's good. We're going to be representing that red flag to the best of our ability.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, for myself, I'm so super excited to be here again in Canada. Last time in Vancouver, it was a perfect night for all of us Canadians. So yeah, we're just ready to make history again.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, last time in Vancouver, I was on the card with Marc-Andre. We kind of got spoiled, man. Like, I don't want to fight anywhere else other than Canada now. Like, the reception we got, the crowd literally almost fell on us in that one, on me specifically. That energy was intoxicating, is addicting. I've been craving that feeling again since fighting in Vancouver. And to not only get to fight in Canada again, but the closest city to me, Toronto, to fight in what's now the Scotiabank Arena, but everyone who grew up in this area knows that arena as the ACC, right? That was the arena growing up as a kid. That was the one where we used to go watch the Leafs play. That's where we used to, growing up, that was the arena to go to. So for me, this is like monumental.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. This is my first UFC fight, and I get to do it in front of all my family, all my friends in Toronto. I was here at the event 2018, Holloway versus Ortega. I felt the energy in the arena. I visualized it, I manifested it, and now it's a reality, and I'm just so excited.
First of all, for Charles, I mean, obviously this has been a long time coming. You're a veteran of the sport now. I'm wondering if that's a silver lining in having your Canadian debut, and that you've been in big fights. You've been in front of the spotlight for a while now.
Yes, do you mind if I pick the mic? No, it's good? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's like I was there when the crowd fell on Mike, seeing Marc-Andre beat Anders. Like, I was there, I was like, man, I wish I would be on those cards, but it's okay. Life works in mysterious way, and now I get to have a very nice striking match against Woodson in Toronto. It's a great striker. People are like, oh, we don't know him much, but he's a very, very dangerous man, and we think in UFC that you need to tell yourself there's no easy fight. People say even though you don't know him yet, it doesn't mean he doesn't pose a threat. If I don't take it seriously, it could be the worst night of my life. So I need to be very aware of the fact that people want blood. They're going to be like pushing us to do a show, but if we overdo it, we can make a mistake and it's not a good night. So Toronto will be crazy, but we need to stay stoic and control of our emotion in order to deliver the best performance we can.
And for Mark, you've had your Canadian debut. You fought here a few times now, and you're coming off a big win in Vancouver. I'm wondering how different the power bar, the Marc-Andre Barriault of today is compared to the one who fought in Ottawa and Edmonton those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I evolved a lot in the sport. Like, I made my debut in Ottawa. It didn't go my way at that time. I made all the adjustments I had to do. I moved to the U.S. for a training camp. And since then, I feel like I'm more aware of myself, what I can bring to the table. And just in general, I just enjoy the ride and be me and deliver the power bar every time. So I'm very excited and looking forward to do great in Toronto.
Sure. And then, Mike, I think that the two words that need to be said here are Neil Magny. That is a huge step up in competition and probably a sign that the promotion sees something in you. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. To be perfectly honest, I don't care about the name, I care about the number beside it. So I'm fighting for number 13, I'm fighting for my ranked spot, I'm fighting for my spot on the ladder and starting my climb toward a title.
Looking forward to it. And last one for Serhiy. This fight was basically announced when Ramon got his win on the Contender Series, and I'm wondering if you were in the know, did you have an inkling that it was coming, and what are you doing differently to prepare for him the second time?
When he won, I saw Sean Shelby whisper to Dana White something, and I was like, I tried to get on top of it. I made an Instagram post like right away, trying to. I knew that fight was going to happen, but I tried to make it happen in Toronto. So I made that post, asked for it in Toronto, and Dana announced it that night that it's going to be in Toronto, which was wild. And adjustment wise, I barely did any of what I'm able to do, like my game plan, all these things. They're still in the unknown. A lot of the stuff I wanted to show off, I never even got to show off because that fight ended so early. So we're just going to keep adjusting. My mindset is 1% better every single day. I'm trying to get 1% better every single day. So the Serhiy that shows up on January 20th is a completely different monster than the guy who fought Ramon on September.
Hey Dave, question for you. When you look at the UFC's pay-per-view offering, on a year-round basis, there's always a few signature events, aren't there? Like MSG in November, Abu Dhabi in October, International Fight Week in Las Vegas. Could Toronto or Canada in general be one of those markets that you can bring a guaranteed pay-per-view as a signature event every single year? And could it be in summer, potentially? Please.
The short answer is absolutely. I think if you look back at our history, we've always come to Canada every year with a pay-per-view event. There are naturally pay-per-view cities in the country. We've, back in June in Vancouver, we've held very successful pay-per-views in Calgary, in Edmonton, in Montreal, in Winnipeg, in Toronto. So I think those destinations, earmarked for Canadian pay-per-views, will be the short list. There'll be no shortage of fight nights to get to other countries, or other cities, I should say, across the country. As for finding a particular date like we've got with International Fight Week in Las Vegas in July, we just went through New York at Madison Square Garden, which is a tentpole event for us. It's a little bit more challenging, I think, in this country because there are, a short list, as I mentioned, of those cities for pay-per-views. There's also a lot of sports that dominate the arenas, and so for us, it can be challenging finding dates, but we will always find a pay-per-view date every year in Canada.
And obviously a big deal's been made about the previous relationship with SportsNet and working together to help profile the incredible run of Georges St-Pierre. But what I see right now in front of me and across this country is kind of similar to what we've seen in the UK post the Michael Bisping era. Is this golden generation of fighters coming through. We've got Leon Edwards and now Tom Aspinall as champions. Could you just perhaps speak to the current crop of Canadian fighters in the UFC and could we see the next Georges St-Pierre in this crop?
Listen, I think we're very respectful to the history with Georges and the commitment that he's made to our sport, but we're not resting on that. Our commitment's to the future, and I think the nice thing about this card with 2 championships, a number of, at least one former champion with Jan Blachowicz, several contenders who have fought for belts, Raquel Pennington, as well as Dominic Reyes. We've got a bounty of future stars for Canada. And not only these 4 gentlemen here, but think of Brad Katona, who's won Ultimate Fighter twice, and a number of other ones. So our commitment is to the future, and we're just so honored to have these 4 plus 4 others at least. We've still got at least one more slot on the card. I think that's available according to our matchmakers. But our commitment to Canada is for the future, and bringing Canadian mixed martial arts to the forefront of the sports community in our country.
I've got a question for Mike as well. You kind of referenced the Vancouver event earlier this year. You cut a hell of a promo, electrifying, and now you've got the opportunity to be fighting in Toronto, which is essentially a home game for you. Could you compare, contrast, and even try and anticipate what the atmosphere is going to be in when you walk out at the Scotiabank Arena?
Well, of course, I'll have a lot more friends and family present, and had Vancouver not been so unbelievably electric, I would say it's going to be an even bigger reception this time, but I don't know how much bigger you're going to get than Vancouver, to be perfectly honest. Like, that place was roaring. I could barely hear myself in the post-fight interview. The energy from the fans, even like the press conference on Thursday was packed. Like, the amount of people who came out for the presser, who came out for the weigh-ins, who came out way before the fight just to feel what they've been missing the last 5 years in Canada. Was a lot of pent-up energy from fans, and they got it out that night. I feel like, if anything, it's going to be bigger in Toronto. I feel like this card's even more stacked than the card in June. So I feel like it's going to be, I feel like the Scotiabank Arena is going to be absolutely vibrating on fight night.
Question for Dave. If you can just talk to us a bit about several months ago with the merger being completed with TKO, WWE does have a deal with SportsNet. Does any of that play into the dynamics that made for these negotiations to go smoother, or are these two sides essentially operating independent of each other when it comes to an international deal like this with SportsNet?
It's a good question. So the short answer is we've been acting independently of one another as we've gone through this process for our Canadian broadcast rights. But that's all changing now that, we just had our Q3, the first quarterly earnings report for TKO, which was last week, delivered by some of the executives on our team. We're heading into a new period now where we're starting with this integration. What does it mean to have UFC and WWE, combining forces? I can tell you that, Dana's been pretty clear, Ari's been pretty clear. Our products will remain independent, but there's a lot of overlap in some of the specialties and expertise that we've got with operating our businesses, and media rights is absolutely one of them. It's great that we're all here today. Hopefully Greg's got some time and we can sit down and talk about what the future looks like for WWE. But I think what we're going to see is now, our businesses and our teams starting to integrate to figure out how to take TKO, both UFC and WWE, to the next level. And we're excited. There's an incredible amount of synergies between the two businesses, of similarities. They've got an absolutely astoundingly large fan base around the world. Have done such a great job through digital media and their broadcast relationships around the world, and their ability to build talent is absolutely something that I think we can take a page out of their books for. Absolutely, we're looking forward to it.
And if you can just take us into a bit of a timeline for a deal of this level, how it begins and how many months back are we talking about? And when you're initially sitting down for those meetings, like, what are you looking for that necessitates such a move like this?
And so you're talking about the UFC deal?
The UFC moving to SportsNet.
So really it started probably in earnest about 1.5 years ago. We know that we've got all of our rights kind of co-terminating at the end of this year, and so it gives us a bit of a blank canvas to try to figure out what the best content distribution strategy is. And so we explored a number of different scenarios, and ultimately we decided that it made most sense for this partnership that can help build our sport via linear TV, via digital platform and digital outlets, as well as continue to sell pay-per-views across the country from the same distribution or transactional platforms as people has bought from in the past. So it was a long process. We're happy where we are. We're thrilled where we're at today, and we're really excited for Jan 1st.
And last one is for Mike. Obviously, UFC 289, it was a huge night, not just for the Canadian fighters on the card, but a big statement for Canadian MMA. And being on the ground as you are, if you can just give us kind of a look into the state of the regional scene in MMA. We've seen the turbulence it has gone through. What state do you see it in today that's being led by you guys going into this card in January?
I think we're in an amazing stage right now. I've been saying it for years that this area is about to blow up. We're on our way up. I was saying it with this kid in mind the last couple of years, and he's here now. So this kid's proof I'm not a liar, man. We're on our way up. You watch more recent local promotions, one I've done commentary for, Unified MMA, a couple of weeks ago. The talent on that card, you could throw a handful of those guys in the UFC or Contender Series and watch them swim just fine. So I really expect Canada to make another huge run. We get a ton of questions about George St. Pierre as Canadian fighters, and people talk about the shadow and of living in his legacy. I don't think of it so much as a shadow as it is we have a path that's been paved for us. He worked so hard to bring MMA fans to this sport and build a community, and since then that community has been hungry for talent, and we have this pool of fighters that's, I'm sure, just about to explode. We're about to continue to break through as far as fighters coming into the UFC, and now Canadian fighters getting into the rankings, right? Marc-Andre and I both have the opportunity to be ranked after this fight, and I expect both of us to have numbers beside our names after this fight.
Hey
guys, Jeff Verhoeven from City News 680. Dave, have you broken the news to the non-Canadian fighters what the weather typically is like here in January?
We've got a few Europeans on the card, so I think they'll be fine. Not sure how the Brazilians are going to fare, but I think it's a special time to year. I mean, this is sort of truly this will epitomize the Great White North, and so I think for us, it doesn't matter when we come to Canada. It's not like there's going to be any slowdown in the interest. We're feeling pretty bullish heading into the ticket sales process this week. I think more than anything, we're just honored to be able to show not only fans around the world who will be watching this pay-per-view, but people who are traveling into Ontario to see the fight in Toronto, just how special our country is. And that platform will be huge for us on Jan 20th.
Hey guys, excuse me, Adam Martin from bookies.com. Got a couple of questions for pretty much everyone on the panel here. For Dave, you did mention there's an open spot on the card. Jasmine Jastovicius, she's on Twitter, she wants to fight Andrea Lee. Can we get her on the card?
So, I wish I could make a commitment to that. All our fights are done by Dana and the matchmakers. So I'm sure they'll see this, they'll hear that call out, they'll see her tweets. But yeah, we'll leave that up to those guys. So we'll see over the next couple weeks what transpires.
Awesome. Another question. Charles right now is the longest tenured fighter, I believe, on the roster from Canada. Before him was John McDessie. He was recently released by the UFC. Do you have any thoughts about his tenure in the UFC? I think he was in there for 14 years. He fought in that card in Toronto where he had that spinning back fist.
I was just going to say that spinning back fist. I think that's still used in the Bubba O'Reilly package that we run at the beginning of the pay-per-view. Long-standing Canadian UFC athlete, and when I think about him, I think about where he came from, the likes of Hominick and Sam Stout, and a number of Rory McDonald, and a number of those guys that really made an impact. And he stood the test of time. I mean, it's no surprise. He was a durable fighter. He was an aggressive fighter. He was a dynamic fighter, and really made Quebec proud, made Canadians proud. And he fought in a variety of different places around the world, and we would connect with him, whether it was in Brazil or in Australia or wherever he was fighting. And he was always so proud to wave the Canadian flag. So we will miss him absolutely. But again, we're looking forward to Canadian MMA.
The headliners aren't here, but we do have 2 title fights on this card, which is amazing. What's the buzz on social media, the UFC scene? Because I just know from my group of friends, when the Strickland Duplessis fight got announced, it was just a lot of excitement. What are you seeing? What's the UFC feeling as far as that goes?
So I think there's a lot of storylines that go into the main event that we're all excited to promote and then see the product of. They've both come off incredible bodies of work. I mean, what Strickland did to Izzy in Sydney back in September was incredible. I mean, he really adapted his game plan and overtook arguably one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. So that performance was incredible. And I'll put him up against Duplessis, who just came off this huge win against Robert Whittaker, who, against Izzy had some epic battles. I think the matchup is incredible. Plus, it leads to some pretty interesting storylines moving out of that fight. Is Izzy going to come back? You saw Poatan this weekend take the belt. Is Izzy going to go up a weight class? What's going to happen if Duplessis wins? So I think we're all thrilled and we're all excited to have such a coveted matchup. And there's going to be fireworks. There's no doubt about that.
Mike, you mentioned earlier you're doing a commentary analysis for Unified. Put your commentator hat on and break down the fight with Neil Magny. I want to hear what you feel about it stylistically.
About my fight?
Yeah.
I just focus on what I'm going to do, man. I've got 10 wins with 10 stoppages, 4 by strikes, 6 by submission. I don't care how this fight ends, as long as it ends in stoppage. Awesome. I don't feel like the job's completely done if you don't get a stoppage. So I'm looking to put this guy to sleep. I don't care if it's by strike or by strangle, but I plan on being the only one conscious at the end of this fight.
Awesome. Marc-Andre, you're fighting a ranked opponent, which was mentioned, Chris Curtis. Were you pleasantly surprised when you got the number 14 ranked guy coming off your last win?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the one who he has everything to lose. I'm not even ranked yet, but I feel I deserve it since my last fight, since 3 or 4 more fights. And I just feel especially here in Toronto, it's my time, and people know that what I can bring to the table. I'm always exciting fighter to watch, and they call him the action man. I'm the power bar, so I think we we have a firework fight right there. Yeah.
The last question for Charles. I think 2 of your last 3 wins are by submission. Most people look at you as like a striker, right? Now you're submitting guys. Can you talk about your evolution of your MMA game?
Yeah, I have a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu under Fabio Olanda, who's a master in the Jiu-Jitsu world, and I have to develop this guillotine because every time I'm trying to give people a spectacle, there's a guy who's trying to hug me towards a decision. So I need to strangle people now. So if you want to make a boring fight, I'll just strangle you, get my paycheck, and leave. So yeah, that's it. I'm a striker. This guy's a striker, so it's good. But every time I fought strikers, I'm like, yeah, we're going to stand and bang. And finally, they're like, trying to get me to the cage. So yeah, I'll choke Woodson out if he wants to make it boring.
All right, I think that's it for today. I want to thank everybody for your participation here today and your commitment to the UFC and the Sportsnet relationship. What we're going to do now is all depart the stage and we're going to get a photo op with the 4 fighters who are here. And again, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you on January 20th. Thank you.